All right, let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Anybody checking the YouTube stream that you can see my screen as well? Okay, you just see me. Does it show the screen? You know? Well, I guess I could see it here. Let me see. Oh yeah, okay, that's perfect. Excellent. All right, excellent. Let's see where we are. Let's take a look at the syllabus. All right, let's see. We are starting week 7. So today we're gonna continue with the our discussion on Redux. We're gonna try and now integrate Redux with a RESTful API. It's the same RESTful API that we've been using for the last couple of weeks, almost a month or so. And so up to this point, we've only been using the state as maintained within the browser using Redux, and but mostly just static content. We've been able to add some modules and some lessons to a couple of reducers, but it's mostly just been some static arrays that have some initial values in the Redux. And so we're going to integrate it so that we can store this data permanently on a server, right? It's the same server that we've been using for a couple of weeks. And the interesting part will be is when is it that we synchronize both the state that is permanently saved in the server and the state that lives in Redux, right? So we'll need to strategize how to do that. So we'll continue working on that. We also need to take a look at how is it that we're going to parameterize the components that we have so far, right? We know that there's some dependencies between selecting data in one screen, right, and being able to use that parameter to pass it to another screen, and based on that parameter that we pass, right, be able to load the content of that screen, right? In the case that we have is that we're navigating from selecting a particular course, right, and then we navigate to a course editor. We need to know which course are you editing, and then load that content for that particular course, right? So we'll talk about how to encode that information in the URL so that we can drive the rest of the application based on that state change in the URL. So we're going to be spending some time there. Later this week, we'll depending how we're doing with Redux and how far we've got with the current assignment, we'll try and get started with RESTful APIs, creating our own RESTful APIs. Now, right now, you're using one that I've created and I've made available to you. I've documented it, and we've used it for many of the assignments. But really, we'd like you to have the skills to create your own API, right? To follow best practices. What are some of the standards, some of the conventions, right? And create RESTful APIs so you can expose your own data models. So we'll see if we can get started on that on Wednesday. If not, we can certainly do it after the exam. The exam, the first exam is coming up next week, so a week from this Wednesday. And so I'll provide a couple of sample questions from past midterms, and so you know what to expect. It's going to be just like the quizzes I've been taking so far. It's a lot of multiple choices, a lot of fill in the blanks, many puzzles that you need to solve. and based on based on Redux, based on React, jQuery and whatnot, right? So that I'll ask you what happens if you click here, click there. After a couple of times, right, and a couple of iterations, you would tell me, what is the output. So yeah, so that's happening on Wednesday. It'll be available Wednesday morning, and it'll be available for 72 hours. You can choose when is it that you want to take it. And it'll be about 3 hours long, and an open book. What else? Lots of random questions, right? I'm going to try and make it so that there's many different random questions, equally difficult or equally easy. But the intention is that no two students are going to have exactly the same exam. That's the intention. Again, to minimize any chances that folks might be collaborating. So yeah, we'll get started. Also, depending on how we do with the review, we're going to do a review next Monday. A final review, and on what are the questions are, what exactly you should expect, or what not to focus on. We'll do that on Monday. We're also probably the day of the exam. We'll talk a little more about the project, and we can create maybe a small little prototype that illustrates some of the features that you're expected to build for the project. And when we come back from the exam, we'll keep working on building RESTful APIs. We'll build them first using Java, and when we come back a little later, we'll do it again, but using Node.js. Right? So you get a chance to do it both ways, either using Java or Node.js. Later on in week 11. All right, so that's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Let's see, there's a question on the chat. When will the practice sample example be available? Yeah, I'll put together something for Wednesday, and I'll shoot everybody in a PDF of some questions I'll put together. Okay. All right, so let's see where we left off last lecture. Any questions before we get started? All right, so no questions. Let's take a look at the code that we left off last lecture. Let me move this around. Okay. Okay, so let's start this up and see where we left off. So we were building this online course editor, online learning management system, right, where we can display courses either as a table, or we can display it as a grid, right? We can toggle between the two, and it displays exactly the same content, but one laid out one way, the other one laid out a different way. We can also navigate to an editor. There it is. And this editor is built using Redux. We're using Redux to maintain the state of this component, whereas these two components we're using just a plain old out of the box React state management system, right? And we wanted to contrast and show you how two different ways of doing it. We did say that for a small state, for a state that doesn't expand across multiple components, if it's a self-contained modular, then certainly the out-of-the-box state management is useful, right? It's definitely appropriate. You can either implement it using classes with a state variable, or definitely you can use just functional component and use the different hooks. But for application-wide state, that it would be much better if you use Redux, right? So here we're showing a part of the application using Redux, and another part of the application using state management, React state management. And so this part of the editor, it's going to get much more complex, right, as we move forward and implement several other things. So from now on, we're just going to stick to using Redux for maintaining the rest of the application state, right? Obviously, we're going to leave the course editor, the course grid and table, we're going to leave them as they are, right, using plain old React state. But from now on, right, we're going to stick to Redux for the remainder of the semester. All right, so what do we need to do here? So what we have here in the course editor, we have two components. One is the list, module list. We have and there's the things, right, which we haven't yet implemented. We know that if we are in the course table, right, there is a dependency between looking at this course, right, and clicking on a course. And when you navigate to navigate here, presumably you would see the content for that course which we just clicked on, right? So if I click on another course, then I would see the modules for that course, right? If I click on a different course, then I would see modules for that particular course. So there's a dependency here that we need to implement. There's also a dependency between these links over here, these modules, and the lessons, right? That if I click on a particular module, then I would have to see the lessons for that module. If I click on a different module, then it would be a completely different list of lessons, right? So today we're going to focus on how is it that we are going to deal with that, right? So there are a couple of different ways that we can deal with it. We could maintain state in the application and maybe listen for those clicks, and based on those clicks, we can have on-click events and keep track on which one did you select. And then using the IDs of the one that you select, we could go fetch the data from the server, right? The problem with that approach is that anything that you're storing in the state, right, is vulnerable for losing that state if someone just refreshes the page, right? If you would save somewhere that the particular current state is that you selected module 345, if you refresh the screen, then that variable would go away, right? It's gone, right? It's not permanently stored anywhere. Okay. Right now, this content right here is hard-coded, right? That's why it survives the refreshing of the screen, right? But we need to store this information somewhere where it can survive the refreshing of the screen, right? So a typical way that we deal with those is that either we send it to the server, and the server, we can go fetch it later on, right? What the state is. That's one way. Another approach is to encode it as part of the URL, right? Because whatever you type in the URL, whatever you type in the URL, right, and then you press enter, the notice that the URL remembers, right, what is the path, what is it that you type. Especially even if you do a command R, control R, it remembers that URL, right? So if we could encode enough information as part of that URL, we could then parse that URL to recreate the state as it was when 2 minutes ago, right? We could recreate that. So that strategy is called URL rewriting, right, or URL encoding. Okay, it's a very common technique, especially if you want to, store information, maybe part of the bookmark, or you want to copy that URL and send it off to somebody. Just imagine the way Amazon works, right? That you're perusing through some content. You navigate to a particular product, you want to share that with somebody, and as you were navigating and interacting with the application, you were changing the state of the application. So how is it that we could copy that state somehow, right? And if somebody wants to navigate to that screen, right, how is it that they would be able to see exactly what I see, without going through the same paces, through the same navigation, through the same interactions, and creating the same state? We need to somehow encode all that state somewhere. Okay, so if I copy that link, I mean all those pages are all dynamic, right? It's a result of a complex set of interactions that I've had with the application, right? I need to be able to encode all that, right? So that if I copy and send that link to somebody, if they click on that link, they would be able to see exactly what I see, right? So yeah, that's what we're going to practice today, right? We're going to encode information in the URL to be able to communicate between the pages, between the components, right? And even grab that state and send it off to somebody else so that they can see exactly what we see. Now, there's two things that we need to encode, right? Notice that if we are in the in here, right, in the course table, if we click on a course, these modules that load up here need to be loaded based on the course that we clicked on, right? So somehow here we need to be able to encode the fact that right? And based on that, load the modules for that particular course, right? So definitely communication between screens we need to implement, okay? And now there's also a dependency between components in the same screen, like for instance, between the modules here and the lessons of here, right? So we're going to take the same exact approach, right? We're going to append, right, at the end of this, enough information about whatever module you selected. You know, as you click on different modules, we're going to encode that ID in the modules, and then load the lessons that are for that specific module, right? So if you click on different modules, different lessons load here. Same thing between lessons and topics, right? I'll let you work on that one. So I'm going to show you how to do it between modules and lessons, and then you can do it from between lessons and topics to practice. Okay. So yeah, so we need to be able to encode all this information here, right? One is between screens, right? Whereas this one is in the same screen between components, right? How is it that they talk to one another? Yeah, again, driven by the URL, right? What each one's going to do, each component, the lesson, right, and the modules, right, they're implemented in separate components. They're both going to try and grab the ID, those IDs that they care about, right? And those IDs is what going to drive the actual content, right? So the lessons that are displayed here are going to be driven by the module ID, and whereas the modules here is going to be driven by the course ID that we clicked on in the previous screen. Right, so that's the strategy. So let's talk about that first, right? Encoding the URL, and then we'll focus on how to use those URLs, parse the state, right, and decide that we need to go out to the server and fetch some data or not. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to be working on today. Let's get to it. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at the implementation that we have so far of these modules, right? So the module list, let's see. I believe it was in the top level component here. We have the course manager. In the course manager, we have all our routes, right? We have the route that renders the tables. Course table, we render the grid, and here's the editor. Okay, so what we'd like to be able to do is encode the fact that, you know, if I pass you some ID, right? For instance, if I pass you a course ID, right, as part of the URL, right, you'd like to be able to pick it up on the other side, right, on that component, right? So the way we're going to do that is that our pattern, the pattern that we're going to be using, right, is going to allow me to put in there a parameter. See the colon in front of this, right? It says that all of these are literal strings. So /courses literally followed by the string editor followed by something. Right? Notice the colon. Colon means that this course ID is not literally course ID. It means that it's a placeholder. Right? It's a placeholder. And what route is going to do is that it's going to parse that placeholder, and it's going to use that identifier that we use here. It's going to use it so that it'll create a map. Right? The map, the key of the map is going to be this variable that we add here. It's going to, we should refer to it as a path variable. Right? It's a variable that is bound to a path element. Okay. And it's going to say, well, that path element, course ID, the value, the actual value that it was actually typed is so-and-so. Right? And it's going to provide it to the component so that the component can then read that information, right, and decide what to do with it. Okay. So let's do it, right? Yeah, so here's a course ID, and so you know, if we refresh. Right, this is bound to that course ID now, right? And so we need to be able to read that course ID, this element here, right? Let's not start off with modules. Let's see if we can just parse this part, right? So see, notice the pattern, right? courses, editor, and then something after that. And that is now bound to this course ID, right? So how do we retrieve that? You know, if it's some parameter that is being passed along, right? So the way we do it is that we can go to course editor, and the router, right? The router mechanism, right? Part of the or provide several hooks to interact with the path. Okay, they are fully documented here. If you look for React router DOM, right, and you look for the hooks. Slow. Okay, down below here, see this right here? See this hooks? Okay, there's history hooks, there's params hooks, there's the location hooks. So we're going to be using this use params, right? And what use params is going to allow us to do, okay, is that we're going to be able to read anything that is encoded as part of the URL, bound to those placeholders. We're going to be able to read those placeholders, right? So for instance, here we have a route that is bound to /blog/:slug, right? So this is a placeholder, right? So it's like a path variable, a parameter. And so the component, right, is going to be able to read, you know, whatever parameters are embedded in that URL, you know, using params. Okay. All right, so let's use that. Let's so let's see, the course manager is encoding the course ID as part of path, right? And from the course editor, we can use that that params. So use params, right? And then from within here, we can read that parameter. Okay. Now to do that, we're going to have to modify our function, our course editor function, just a little bit, right? Notice that this provider here, right, is being notice that that's an implicit return. See that? This function is implicitly returning this provider, right? All this content beneath here, right? So remember that this syntax is a shortcut, right? That if you only have a single return, then you can certainly use this syntax. But here we want to do more than just return. We want to do something before we return. In particular, we want to be able to parse that path variable, right? So I'm going to change this function, right, so that so that it has an explicit return as opposed to right now has an implicit return, right, so that we can add a couple more lines of code, right? So let's do that. Very easy. Right, so what we're going to do is that we're going to wrap this whole thing inside of a parentheses, right? And then we're going to do a return. Okay, and then this whole thing we're going to wrap in curly brackets. Okay, there we go. We did it. Okay, there we have it, like that. Okay, notice that now, basically, we have this explicit return as opposed to before we had an implicit return. Okay, so this provider could definitely be down here if we want, like that. Okay. All right, so we have exactly the same content as before, right? But now we have an explicit return as opposed to an implicit return, right? The only reason we did this is because before we return, I want to do something, right? In particular, I want to be able to parse, right, the parameters that were bound, right, to the course ID, right? Remember here we are binding, right, the third element in the path. We're binding it to a variable called course ID, so I want to be able to retrieve it. That's exactly what we can do with use params. Okay, we're able to parse that path element, right, and extract it from the parameters. Make sense? Okay. Okay. So having said that, just to try it out, see if it works. Let's see. We have this course editor here, right? This if we are here in the course editor, let's put it like right after this course editor. It's like right here. And so let's render it right there. Course ID. There it is. See that? This is exactly what's in there, the third element in the path, right? Whatever you type, notice that, you know, we are being able to parse it, right, from the path. Make sense? All right. So ideally, I would be able to, use that to load modules. Obviously, there's no such thing as a course ID DDDD. Where would we get this? We would get it from, ideally, we would get it from the ID of the course ID. That's what we really want to send over, right? Right. So clicking on this and then navigating over there. Okay. So let's do that. Let's change these URLs. Right now, this is encoded to courses/editor, right? But really, we want to encode it to courses/editor/ and then followed by some ID, right? So let's modify all these table so that it adds the course ID at the end, right? So let's do that. So if we head over to the course row, is where we create that link, right? Here's the link. There's the link right here. Okay, so there's where we're generating that URL that allows us to navigate to the editor. But we want to add or pen the ID, right? So that I can pass the ID over to the other component, to the other screen. So the way we're going to do that is that we're going to, instead of making this hard-coded string, we're going to convert this into an expression that we can calculate so that we can append the ID of the course, right? Because here we have the courses being passed to us. Here's the course, and in there, this should be an ID. So let's do that. Let's convert this into an expression, right? And then instead of double quotes, we're going to make it in backticks, right? Because so that would allow us to do string manipulation, right? So I'm going to convert this into backticks. There we go. So this allows us at the end, right, to encode the course ID, right? So we can add here a variable. We have the course, right? And presumably we have the ID there. Let's see if that worked. All right, so if we go back here, right? If I notice that at the bottom, we can see at the bottom over here, right? We can see that indeed we have the ID, right? That ends with FDD. That one ends with FE6. We have that FE8. So let's click on it. We click on it, notice that indeed we have encoded the ID of the course, right, as part of the URL. Perfect. And notice that we are actually able to extract that ID. So that ID could drive this left-hand side, right? This component can now know, says, oh, that's the modules that you want. You want the modules for that course, right? And if I go somewhere else, some other course, it'll be some different list of modules, right, for a different course that I select. Does that make sense? Everyone still with me? Okay, so let's practice that again, right? Let's do that again. We want to do the same thing, right? But for lessons. Okay. Just a second. Just a second. Okay. All right, we're back. So we want to do the same thing that we just did for encoding the course as part of the URL. We want to do the same thing for encoding the modules, right? Because this is going to drive this left-hand side over here, right? And if we click on different modules, right, we want to append here the module ID. We're going to append the module ID so that we can drive the list of the modules. Let's see. We have a question on the chat. Let's see. Params are the ones that are followed by colon, right? It can be several, right? Yes, you can put as many parameters as you want, as we'll see in a minute. We're going to do the same thing to encode the module ID. Yep. Does it just generate random IDs? No, well, those IDs are being generated by the database, right? When we store it in the database, right, the database creates those primary keys for us. Yeah, those are coming from the server. Perfect. Yep. Okay, so we want to be able to do the same thing for the modules, right? Okay, so let's do that. So who's doing this? This link is being generated by who, right? If you remember, this, right, is our editor, right? It's our editor, so which is the same one that we're using here to edit the lessons. Okay. Oops. Yeah, we never finished that. Go back. so where is this, right? So this is our editable item, I think it's called. Let's take a look at the editable item. There it is, right? And here is the link right here, right? Which really we're not using at all, right? It's just a bogus hyperlink that it's not pointing to anything. Okay, so we need to be able to make this a link, right? So that when we click on it, right, we want to be able to encode the ID over here, right? So for instance, something like, the ID of the module that you select, right? And then we can use this to drive the content of the lessons. Okay, so what does that URL look like? The URL ID followed by the module ID. Okay, right? And so that if I click on a particular one and the ID is there, I want to be able to grab that, and this will drive this content, and this will drive this content over here. Okay. All right. So how do we do that? Okay. So there it is. So I've already created my pattern, right? And where the first path element is here, well, the third path element will be mapped to course ID, and the fourth path element is mapped to module ID. Right? Then the course editor can grab that from here. Module ID would be able to grab it from here like that. Right? And then we can maybe render it over here. But right now we don't have that just yet. Well, I mean, we do. We can grab it, but these are all bogus values, right? We need to be able to grab it from the module that we select. As we select the different module, right, we need that ID to change over here, right? Okay, so we're able to grab the information from the path. We need to be able to generate all those paths, right? And those are going to be all from here, right? So where do we generate this, right? So that as we said earlier, right, it's in our editable item. It's right here, right? This is the hyperlink that we need to dynamically be equal to either, right, these modules, these IDs for the modules, or the lessons as we select later, right? Because later on we want to be able to tack along also the lesson that you select, and then the topic that you select, and then the any other component, right? We need to be able to tack along, all the different steps that you took, right, to navigate through this hierarchical data structure, right, as you navigated deeper and deeper and deeper into the application. Okay, so how do we do that? How do we make this generic enough that we can this editable item, right? How can we make it generic enough that it can calculate what this hyperlink is? Well, what we're going to do is that we're not going to have the editable item calculate that. Right? We're going to leave this alone, right? Instead, we're going to calculate from the outside, right? The module list has enough information that has the links and has the IDs of the modules, and the lesson tabs also has the IDs of the lessons. Yes, and it also knows what its parent module is, right? So each one of these components has enough information to calculate what that hyperlink should be. Right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to calculate those hyperlinks way out here in the module list and the lesson tabs, and we're going to pass it down to each one of the editable items, right? So that as an attribute. Okay, so what we're going to do here is that we're going to accept an attribute 2, right? Which we could initialize it here to something, right? Something. Somewhere to go. Okay, and then we can use this as part of this URL that is being passed from our parent. Okay, let's convert this into an actual link, right, from React Router DOM. Perfect. React, did it load? Did it load? React Router DOM. There we go. Oh, no, here. There we go. And then instead of an href, this is going to be 2, right? And it's going to be whatever we pass from our parent. Okay, so let's convert this into a expression and the variable 2, right, that is declared here. Now, if I go back here and I hover, you'll notice that they are all matching to somewhere to go. See down here you can see somewhere to go. Actually, if I click on it, notice that it goes to somewhere to go, right? So everything now is hard-coded. They all go to somewhere to go, right? They all go to that same thing. So we want the parent who's iterating over all these tabs and items, right, to calculate what the actual link is and then pass it as a parameter down to the editable item, right? So let's do that. Let's go to the module list. Go to the module list. And so same thing we did in the course editor, right? Same thing in the course, what we did in the course editor. We want to parse the path and use it here in the module list so that as we iterate over all the editable items, we can pass as go somewhere else. Right? We want to override that default, and notice that if we click on it, now it says, you know, go somewhere else. Okay, right? So we want to be able to calculate it as we iterate each one of these. We want to be able to decide where we want to go. Right. So let's parse the path. We want to parse the path, right? And based on these IDs, based on this over here, we can then decide what these links should be. Okay, let's do that. All right, so we need to reconvert this. So here's a functional component, right? That is using, again, it's using implicit returns, right? But because we need to do something before we do that return, right? We're going to convert this into an explicit return. And probably it's a good idea to always start with an explicit return, right? So you don't find yourself going back and forth between explicit or implicit. Is that this is so much easier to read, right? Especially if you don't need to do any state, right? Especially if it's just fairly static, right? Then definitely a functional with a implicit return is much easier to read. Nevertheless, it's easy to convert, right? Again, let's do it again. I'm gonna collapse this so I can see what I'm doing. So I have an opening parentheses and a closing parentheses. I'm going to return in front of it, right? And then I'm going to create a curly bracket around it. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we're back where we were. And again, the only reason we did this, right, is so that we can use the use params, right, from React Router DOM. Right, so let's import from the React Router DOM the use params, right, from React Router DOM. There we go. Okay. Right, so having done that, we are going to be able to parse for the modules. Really, the only thing we care about is the course, right? That's all we really care about, right? So let's just parse the course here, and so this is the course ID. Oops. Const course ID, and we'll parse it. We'll use the use params. There we go. Right, and here, right here where we have modules 3, let's make sure that we have indeed parsed the course ID. Okay, we have it, right? So we have the course ID. We do have the course ID. We can then now calculate this 2, right? The 2 should be what? It should be course editor, and then the courses editor, the course ID, and then the module ID, which is going to be different for each one of them. So as we iterate, right, we generate the module, we use the module ID that came from the server, right? So let's do this. So this will be courses, something like that. Okay, something like that, right? So let's make this into an expression, right? So it's not a hard-coded string, it's an expression. Also, we need to concatenate strings, so I'm going to convert it into a backticks, right? And the path looks something like that. So /courses /editor. This is the course ID that we just parsed, the course ID, which we just parsed from the path. Okay, so it's an expression like that, right? And this is the module. We're iterating over the modules. There it is, the module. We're going to use the ID of the module that we're currently iterating over, right? So this is the module ID. So it's module dot and then the ID. See that? Okay. So if we come back here now, if I click on this, notice that we have the ID 123, ID 234, right? These are dummy IDs that we had created in the reducer, right? Those are from the reducer. You remember, those are the IDs that we had. We're playing around with those IDs: 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 5. That makes sense? Everybody still with me?
Yes.
Okay, so just to make sure, right? Let's do that again. Let's do that again, and to encode the lessons, right? To encode the lessons, right? So let's go back to the course manager, right? Now, again, what I could do is just do this : also the lesson. When you click on the lesson, we're going to encode the lesson so that is going to drive the topics, right? Depending on the lessons that you select, we're going to drive the topics. Okay. Now we could do that, and certainly, absolutely, we could do that. I do want to show you just another syntax which you can also use, right? Again, you could use different ways, right? But I just want to show you that you can do it in an additional way. It's as follows, right? You can convert this into a expression, okay, and put this in an array. Put this in an array, and what this allows you to do is kind of like do an OR, right? That you would say, well, either this first element of the array matches, or maybe a second, or a third, or fourth. You can put an array of paths, and it's going to compare the path against all those paths in the array, and whichever matches, right, it will navigate, right, and display that particular content. Okay. Not that you would do it this way, but I did want to point out. Right, so, for instance, what we're going to do here is that I'm going to put two URLs. One of them is going to match module ID, this one, and the other one's going to match the same thing, followed by lesson ID. Okay. Again, you don't need to do it this way, right? You could have, this would have been enough, right? But I do want to point out that you can use arrays, right? I mean, these don't necessarily have to be identical, right? One could be, the shopping cart, and the other one could be somebody else's shopping cart, right? Whatever, I don't know. Okay, a wish list that almost looks like a shopping cart. Okay. All right, so both of these now navigate to lesson to here. So if I have an additional lesson ID here, notice that it navigates here, right? And the lessons could just like this is encoding the modules, the lessons could encode the lesson as you click on the lesson. Okay. So let's do that. In the lessons, where are we? In the lesson tabs, we could grab, the same path parameters that we've been working with, right? Let's do the same thing, right? We're going to wrap this into a we're going to make this into a functional. Okay, and then we're going to put a return here, right? And then we're going to wrap this with curly brackets. There we go. There we go. And only because we're going to put the use params in there, right? So let's do const. We're going to parse. Now here we need to parse a couple things, right? We need to parse we need to recreate the courses from before. We need to recreate the modules from before, right? We're deeper into the hierarchy of the structure that we the structure that we've been navigating. Let's see let's see why the ladder is enough. Why the ladder? Oh yeah, so the question was, I believe the student is referring to, why is this enough? Well, because if you notice, this route is not using exact equal true, right? We're not using exact equal true. So that means that this right here, right, is kind of like a partial match to this. So one kind of includes the other, right? So that if because this is not exact, right? All of these are kind of like you have to at least have these two, right? But all the other ones are kind of optional, right? So anything that starts with courses/editor, blah blah blah, whatever continues, right? All those are part of a courses editor. So anything that starts with courses editor, right, renders into the course editor, right? No matter how many path parameters you might have. Right? So this one over here is so this would absolutely include this one up here, right? So this one's not needed really. If you don't have exact, if you do have exact, then you would have to exact point, and list all the paths individually. Courses editor ID, courses editor, course ID, module ID, blah blah blah, all the way to lesson ID, each one individually. Only course ID is enough. Array is just showing you can use array. Yeah, exactly. Under what circumstances shall we using exact true? I personally prefer to use true. Oftentimes you find yourself that a module is just rendering all the time, and just because it's pattern matching a specific part of a path. And when you want to be very specific about it, says, well, no, I want this component only to render if the URL looks identical to what I'm giving you, right? So if you want to be much more specific, and but if they are embedded inside of the other, like this one, right? Then exact equal false is actually very useful, right? So we can, because one's like inside the other, they're nested. So this is very useful for using exact equal false. But if you have elements that are not related at all with one another, then definitely exact equal true is much better. Yeah. Okay. So inside of our tab, right, we want to be able to parse the course ID, because we want to regenerate the URL, including the course ID, including the module ID. Right, we want to include that and append the lesson ID. So let's parse out the course ID, and we're going to parse out the module ID from the use params. Okay, and use params. Can't find it, so that would be in. I'm just going to copy it from the module list. There it is. I'm going to paste it here. Okay, so use, not user, use params. Let's render it right here, right next to the lessons, just to verify that we got all that. Let's see, do we have a course ID? There we go. We got the course ID. What about the module ID? Do we have the module ID here? There we go, with the module ID. Obviously, these are all bogus modules, right? We need to connect it to a database and get actual values. All right, so let's map this URL here, right? So let's change this so that instead of being this hard-coded, somewhere to go, let's override that. Let's override that in the editable. We can override it and say that the to is going to be oops, that it's going to be /courses. Is it courses? I forget. Yeah, editor /editor, followed by the course ID, followed by the module ID, right, followed by the lesson that you clicked on, right? So it's the lesson that we're iterating over. So this lesson, right, so this will be followed by the lesson._ID. Okay. All right, excellent. So let's click on it. Let's see. There we go. See that? The 1, 2, 3. Right. We are encoding the lesson that we are clicking on. See that? And that's going to drive the topics down below. Okay. Right, so this course ID is going to drive this left-hand side. The module that you clicked on is going to drive the lessons, and this last one, the lesson that you clicked on, is going to drive the topics down below. Right? And then you'll do it again, right? When you click on the topic, that's going to drive the widgets that are listed down below. But that's for the next assignment. All right, so I've been saying about driving, right? That the course that you select is gonna drive the modules. Well, how do we do that? We need to go and integrate this with an actual database, right? We need to fetch this data from somewhere. So let's go fetch it. Okay. All right. So the content in this left-hand side over here is hard-coded, right? We have a reducer, right? We have the module reducer somewhere here. Plain here, hard-coded, but instead we want to go fetch it. We want to go fetch it in from the server. So there's an example question here. Is $ jQuery here? No. Wait, what $? No. This is yeah, no. This is a template. This is a string. It's a string template, right? And this is we are referring to this variable, right, core that has a value, and we are expanding that variable value, right, and making it part of the expression, right? So no, we're not using jQuery here at all. Okay. Yeah, no jQuery. When you're using React, they don't play nice with one another, right? One of them is like, React is way really high up in the context layer, and jQuery is way down below in the context with the DOM. Okay. There are ways to make them play nice with one another, but it's not trivial. Okay, so let's see. So we want to go fetch the data for the module, right? And we had described as part of the assignment, we had explained that we're going to be using a particular URL to create the relationship between courses and modules, right? And up to this point, the way we have been rendering the courses, courses here, the URL has been very simple, right? You just go, your context Januzzi / courses, right? And that's it. You get all the courses, and then you post the courses. You can delete the courses, get the courses. So they're kind of standalone. The list of courses are just plain old standalone, right? They don't live in any particular context. Well, other than being for Januzzi or for someone else, they live in that context. But then once you know which user, it's those courses, and that's it. You get all of them. These are all the courses for me. But when we navigate to a module, we need to. Oops, what happened? Did I break something? Oh, courses editor. What? Wait, is this rendering? Oh, why is that not rendering? Interesting. Course manager. Oh, is it now not letting me do? Oh, because now I added an array and it's being very specific about it. Okay, when you do an array, right, then it does behave as if it were exact. Yeah. So if you use an array, it's very specific about what you want. Okay. So you could you could implement it this way, or right. And let me comment that out. You could use not an array. And just use this one single like that. That works too. Maybe. No? Course editor, course says editor. Interesting. Why is that not working? Course ID, path.
You need to make it accept.
No, exactly. It'll want all three. course editor, courses editor, course editor. All right. Well, I'll take a look at it a little later. I'm not going to debug it now. Let's bring that back like that. Okay. All right. So this one should allow me to navigate to modules, lessons. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's now work on being able to retrieve modules, right, for a selected course, right? And so if I navigate, I click, have courses, right? I can use that courses to drive the list of these modules, right? So how do we do that? Right. So we need to be able to retrieve data from the server, right? And as I was saying, these modules are for that specific course. If you select a different course, somewhere down here, it'll be a different set of courses. So how do we establish the relationship, like a one-to-many relationship between like a parent and a child, right? Each parent has many children. Okay. So as part of that, we explained in the assignments, right, that you could use two different URLs. One for the standalone, all by themselves, all the lists of all the modules, right, or modules within a context. Okay, so down below, I had mentioned here that for the module service, right, you could use this URL pattern to establish the relationship between a parent course and its child modules, right? And so we've been using actually this URL pattern, right, where you just use the modules, right? You can list all the modules, a particular module, you can delete a module, you can update a specific module, right? But this one here allows us to establish the relationship between any parent and any children, right? And separated by the ID of the parent. Okay, this is classical RESTful, web services, right? Which we'll start learning about it, how to implement it on your own later this week, right? So this is the URL pattern that we're going to be using. I'm going to copy that to establish the relationship between courses and module, and you're going to do the same thing to establish the relationship between modules and lessons. And then you're going to do the same thing to establish between lessons and topics, right? Between any parent and any children. Okay. So let's do the first one. Let's do this one, the relationship between courses and its children modules. Let's copy that. Let's create a service, and we'll call it the module service. So it will be JavaScript. This will be module service. Okay, and in here we'll create a URL. Okay, we'll do a const courses URL. Right, notice that it's just the courses like that. We're gonna add this part. We're gonna add this part dynamically, right? When we build the URL, right? But the base URL is just going to be the courses. Also, the NUID is mine. Generally, do not use mine. Right? Do not use my ID. All right. I think I'm going to start penalizing folks that use my ID. Yeah. So I have the URL to the courses, and then now we can implement the various services that we would want. Right. We want let's see. We want export const find modules for course, right, where you provide a course ID, and we fetch from the courses URL, and we return the modules, right? We want to append the course ID, and then say we want the modules for that course, for that particular course, right? So how do we do that? We're going to put this in a backtick, right? And we're going to put this in an expression, right? $, and then you're going to follow it with the course ID, right? And then modules. So we want the modules for that particular course, given the ID of the course. Okay. All right. So this is going to return, right, response, which we're going to parse the JSON. So we're going to start streaming the body of that response, right? And then and then we can use that. Where do we use that? We can use it we can use it in the module list, right? The module list, we have the course ID right there. Right? We have the course ID. And so we could use that course ID to go fetch the modules for that course. But where do we do that? Where do we do that? Or when do we do that? Okay. Well, typically we want to do it when we do what? When we navigate, when we go from here, we click, and then navigate here to this component. So when we're loading, when we are being rendered, okay, this would be a good time to go fetch the data from the server, right, and then display it. Okay, so basically on load, basically that's what we want when we're loading, when the component is loading. And normally you could do this in a class component using the component did mount, right, or maybe in the constructor. Here we don't have any. Right. So to fix that problem, React came up with the idea of a hook. Just like we have this use params, we can also use a hook here that can notify us when a lifecycle event occurred, such as being loaded. Right. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Right. So we're going to here use a hook that is going to allow us to notify when we are loading, right? And the hook is called use effect. Use effect. Okay, so use effect comes from a side effect, right? You know, basically what we want to be able to do is that as you click, right, and as you are, you know, adding and changing the URL, we want different things to happen, right? We want a side effect of you clicking here and there, right? So that's where use effect comes from. So anyway, the way you use use effect, you know, I encourage you to take a look at the documentation for use effect. If you go to React.js, you can look up hooks. So React.js, you can look use effect, and some couple examples that fully document how they work. And you know, they document use states, right, and also use effect a little later. Okay. All right, so let's use it. I'm going to show you how to use it. The way you use it is as follows. Basically, it's a function, right? It's called use effect, right? Is a function. It's a function that is going to where you can provide here. You can provide here a callback function, right? That will be invoked. Whatever you put in there will be invoked when the component mounts, right? And you can do certain things like initialization. You can go out to the, you know, go get state from a third-party API, data from your own API, whatnot, whatever, right? And that's exactly what we're going to do, right? We're going to initialize our state, right? Going out to the server and fetching all this data using the course ID. First of all, we want to make sure we do have the course ID in here. So let's do an alert here. I'm going to say alert, right? And we're going to alert the course ID, right? So we're here and we load. There it is. So you know, if I refresh, notice that we are alerting, and indeed we have that ID. Perfect. Okay, so we do have the ID. Now we do want also to notify the reducer. Right? We want to go fetch the data from the server and then pass it to the reducer, because right now the reducer right now has just static data. Right? It has this array here, which is hard-coded. We want to replace this with data from the server, right? And then it'll trickle down through the provider, down to the components, and it'll re-render and render the list of the modules, right? So we need to notify it. So what we're going to do is that, right, we're going to use here a function that's going to go out to the server, fetch this data, and then pass it to the reducer, right? So let's do that. So we're going to use this service that we just wrote, module, find modules from courses. Let's import that. So import, right, from, and then .. services. like that, right? And then we can use it. We can use it here. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. Let me comment that out. Let me comment that out. Remember, the only way that we can talk to anybody, right, in the module list is through the reducer, right? Remember that all these properties are being provided by who? By our mappers down here, right? So all communication, all data in and out, right, is coming through the state to property mapper, and all event handlers are coming in through the dispatch to property mapper, right? So if we want to call anybody, the dispatch mapper is going to send us this function, right? And then we're going to be able to call it from here. We're going to be able to call it, right? And we're going to be able to pass it the course ID, right? So right now, let's make a dummy function here, course ID, just to see that we can do console log course ID. Let's see. Let's refresh, make sure that we are invoking that function. Console. There it is. Yeah, so we're printing the ID to the console. So we have that. So we are calling this function. Right? Actually, it's kind of confusing, right? That this function has the same name as that function over there. It's kind of confusing. So just to make sure we don't confuse these things, I'm going to leave this commented out. Instead, in this service, what I'm going to do is that instead of exporting this, or instead of importing it this way, I'm going to export an entire API. I'm going to say const API is equal to this guy, right? So instead of, let's export this, right? So export default API. So here, instead of importing this, instead I'm going to import this API from this file. Right, so I'm going to say, I'm going to call it services module service. Okay, so now module service is bound to this API, and now I can access this function through this module service, right? So now it's not confusing, right? I can delete that. Okay, now this cannot be confused with this here, okay? Because I have to go through a service to get to it, okay? Anyway, so who's going to be passing this to me? We got to have the dispatch mapper is going to pass it to me, right? Here's the function. I'm going to pass you the course ID, right? And make sure that we can console, well, we can do alert course ID, right? Right, so it's working. It's working. So we're passing that find modules for course is being bound here, and then I'm calling it here on use effect. There it is. Okay. All right, excellent. So we are able to grab that. Okay, so from here is where I am going to go out to the server and fetch the modules for the course. Right? So we're going to use that service that we wrote seconds ago. We're going to say module service dot find modules for course. Which course? This course ID. Right? And here, presumably, it would return the modules, right? The actual modules for that course. Then we can do a console log the modules. Okay, and if we looks like it failed. Courses module error failed. What? Network? What's going on? Oh, there it is. Oh, it didn't fail. There it is. Review. What's going on? Oh, it's giving me a 59. So okay, so it is coming back. So it is coming back 59. And course ID, and then display mode. Okay, so it looks like it's displaying. Yeah, it's displaying this here. Okay, but notice that it's coming back as empty. It's coming back as empty, which makes sense, right? I don't have any modules for that particular course, right? Makes total sense. And I do need to update the reducer to match whatever the server says, right? The server says there are no modules. Well, then I shouldn't render any modules, right? I shouldn't render any of these modules. Okay, so let's notify the reducer that we went out to find modules and we found none, right? So let's do that. We're going to notify, we're going to say, we're going to dispatch, and we're going to pass an action. The type might be something, well, we went out to find modules for course, and this is what we found. So I found that the modules were the modules, which are just empty for now. They're empty. Okay. So now we're calling the reducer. The reducer is now listening for these actions. So let's go back to the reducer. So we have a brand new action type. Right, we say case, right? And so if we get that, then we're going to return a new state. We're going to copy the old state, and we're going to override the modules. The modules are what? Right? The modules are whatever the server says the modules are, right? And we pass them to you in the action, in the attribute modules. So this would be action.modules. So it's empty right now, right? It's going to override my hard-coded list of arrays. So notice that it's empty. Makes total sense. The server says it's empty. I'm empty. All right, perfect, excellent. So this gives us a good segue into, well, how do we add new modules, right? How do we add new modules? Right now we can add modules, but these are all fake, right? These are modules that we're adding to the local, right? To the local console, to a local state. Also, notice in the network what's going on. See that? I'm in an infinite loop. I'm in an infinite loop. And the reason I'm in an infinite loop is that this module list is making an invocation to the server, is setting the state, and the state passes us the right. So the yield again. So it's kind of like an infinite loop. So to fix this, this takes a second argument. Which stops the infinite loop. Right? Stops the infinite loop. So careful, right? And this argument right now is not relevant. It will be relevant when we do the navigation between the module and the lesson, right? What this allows you to do is take a look at any changes, because right now it's being called only when we load. Right? Actually, that's the only time when we want to call it right now, right? Only when we load, we want to go out and find the modules. Later on, as we click in different modules, we want to call again, go out to the server again, right? For any changes in the properties, as the properties change, right, we want to go fetch the lessons as the properties change. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit different. That's what we're going to use the square brackets for, right? To make sure that we don't end up in a loop, right? And and only call to server only when things change, right? Only appropriate times. Okay. All right, so let's add a new item, right? When we click on this plus. So how does this plus work? Right, so right now we're calling create module, and create module is calling this create module over here. Okay, and it's just blindly going to the reducer, right, and just adding some bogus modules in there, right? But if I refresh, notice that none of this is being made permanent, right? So we're going to try and do the same thing we did now, right? We're going to go out to the server first. We're going to create a new module to the server, and then whatever comes back from the server, that's what we're going to tell the reducer, right? So this is a pattern that we're going to do over and over and over and over. We handle the events in the component. We update the server, where we pass the data to the server, and then whatever comes back, that we pass to the reducer. Okay, makes sense? All right. Okay. All right. So let's do that. Just a second. Let's do that. Let's let's here in the create module, we're going to first call the post to the server, right? And the server, the post is going to do something. It's going to look something like this, right? We're going to have I mean, we've written this so many times, right? So it's going to be something like export const, create, but this is going to be create module for course, right? We've never done that. Create something that is the child of something else. Okay, and so we need the parent and we need the child. Okay, so we need who's the parent, and then the module who's the child of that parent. We're going to do a post where, right? It's the same URL, right? It's going to be $sign course URL followed by the course ID followed by the modules. And what this says is that I am creating this module, but within the context of this course, right? Again, this is the first time we're doing this, right? These two queries are within the context of a parent course, right? Also, this is the method. The method is post, right? And the body is going to be the child module, so which we have to convert into a string, right? And then we also need to say that this is JSON, right? So this is going to be the headers. Is going to be the content type. Content type is going to be application JSON. Okay, so this is going to come back with a response, which we are going to parse. I'm going to stream this, right? And we're going to export this so that everybody can see this. So now here, we're going to call that function from here, right? So we're going to say, I'm going to call that a module. But we need to pass a couple of things here. What do we want to pass? Well, we need to pass, according to this, we need to pass the course ID, and we need to pass some module object. Where do we get these? Well, the course ID is where? Remember, we have parsed the course ID from the component, right? From the path, from the parameter. So we could pass it. We could pass it along as a parameter right here. We can pass it as a parameter when we call create modules over here, right? We want to pass here the course ID because we got it, right? But remember, if we're doing this, make sure to wrap this. You can wrap it, otherwise you're going to end up in an infinite loop, right? And you're going to post hundreds of courses into the server. Careful there, right? Yeah, so there we go. So we're going to pass that. What about the module? What do we get the module? Right? Well, I guess we could hard code it. We know it's going to be a brand new module. We're going to edit it anyway, right? So we could put a dummy module here with a dummy title. Right? This would be new module. Right? No ID, just a title. That's it. Right? Right? And what's going to come back? Right, from the server, the actual module is going to come back, and that's what we're going to tell our reducer that we just added that module. We just added it. Right, so we're going to move that dispatch. Notice that I moved the dispatch, right, and I put it inside of the then. Very important. Okay, only when we get confirmation that we have an actual data that we've been able to save to the server, right? Then we should notify our local state, right? And then trickle down that state all throughout our user interface, right? And so the create module, and we're going to pass here. We're going to pass the reducer, right? The actual module that we just added, so that we can add it to our local array of modules. Right, so we're going to say the module that we just added is the actual module. I'm going to just pass it to the reducer. right? So once I'm in the reducer, in the create module here, instead of me creating this dummy module, instead of creating this dummy module here, this one over here, right? I can just use the module that came from the server, right? Instead of using this dummy ID, okay, I'm gonna comment that out. That's gone away. I'm gonna use the module that came from the server, which I put where? I put in the action.module, right? So I can say action.module. Okay, and that's gonna be the new state, right? All right, so let's try it out. Let's click here. Let's see if this blows up. Okay, new module. Well, that looks promising. Let's add a couple more. 3. Let's refresh. Okay, notice that indeed now it's retrieving the module. But notice there's like a little flicker here. You see the kind of like the old state, right? And then it's being replaced with whatever's in the server. So we can fix that by just emptying this out. Just leaving that out empty. There's no need for having any static content anymore. Actually, I'll just comment it out, just so you remember it was there. Okay, so now if I refresh, notice that it doesn't flicker, right? It just returns those modules that I just created. Make sense? All right, so how about playing around with being able to delete a module, like delete. Right now, we're deleting. I'll let you fix that. If I refresh, notice that I haven't really deleted anything, right? This always have to go to the server first, okay? So let's see how the delete works. Okay, well, in the service, the delete works always the same way, right? We're going to well, first of all, we need the URL for the module, and this URL is going to be independent of the course, our parent course. We don't care, right? If we're creating a new module, you need to know the parent. If you're finding modules, you need to know the parent. But if you're deleting a module, you don't need the parent, right? You can just blow away the module. It doesn't matter who the parent is. Same thing. To that module updated. You don't need to know the parent. Okay. So we're going to use another URL so that we can directly manipulate modules, right? Modules without needing to go through the courses. Make sense? So for deleting, it's going to look very similar to this. Okay, so we're going to say, delete module, and I'm going to pass you the module ID, and I'm going to use the module URL, and the module ID. There we go, right? And it's not going to be a get, it's going to be a delete. So the method is a delete. We're not passing any data, so we don't need to have a body or headers or anything. Okay, and let's export this, right, as part of our API. So once we are in the list here, when we're iterating and we click on the delete, this is the delete module, right? The delete module is right here. Okay, we already have a function for it, right? It's right here, delete modules. There it is. So we have the item. Okay, so before we go out to the reducer, again, it's the same pattern. Before we go out to the reducer, we have to go out to the server. When the server comes back, then we can go out to the reducer. Okay, so let's rewrite this. So this is going to be module service dot delete module. We need the ID of the module, so I believe it's inside of the item. The ID is going to come back with some status information, which we're going to ignore, and then we can go out to the dispatch, right? We can go out to dispatcher and say that, right, we just deleted the module, the item. Okay. All right, so let's try it out. Let's see if it blows up. Let's refresh. Let's look at the network here. So we can say edit this and say delete. Okay, there's a delete that went out. Okay, there's a delete. It says 200 is okay. Let's see if we refresh. Oh, we have an alert there. Okay, let's refresh. Okay, looks like we were able to remove it permanently, right, from the server. Excellent. Looks like there's an alert in the reducer. Let's remove that alert from the delete. Yeah, that alert. Let's remove that. Okay, so we have create, we have find, we have delete. How about update? Like we want to update a module, right? And the update is here, right? So again, same pattern, right? We're going to go up first to the server, we're going to update the server, and when we get back the status or whatever, right, we call the dispatch, right? So let's go to the module list. And so the update is right here, update, right? And the update is being invoked by our editable, okay? And it's passing the module with the new data, right? With the new title, with the new whatever, right? So again, same pattern. We need to first implement the update. The update is going to look very similar to the post. So I'm going to copy that. So this is update module. So update module. Again, the update doesn't care about the course. It just needs to know which module are you updating, and it needs to know the new value for the module, right? So it's going to go out to the module URL. Module URL, the course, the module ID, doesn't care about the modules, right? This is going to be a put. It's going to stringify the module. It's going to do application JSON. It's going to do the status back, right? Let's export this. And then from module list, the update here, remember, the same thing. You know, first go out to the server, and whenever it comes back to the server, then we can call the dispatcher, right? So there's going to be, module service update. Remember, update expects two parameters: the ID for the module itself, and it's going to come back with a status that, again, we're going to ignore. And then in here, we can call the dispatcher. Like that. Okay. All right, let's see if it works, right? If we're here and this is the module, this is the Redux module. Okay. Okay, it looks like it worked. Let's refresh. That it permanently was updated, right? I can update this one as well. This one is React.js. Okay. Right. If I refresh, it works just as well. That makes sense? All right, excellent. Yeah, so we talked about creating new modules for a particular course, be able to find all the modules for a particular course. Those are dependent on a context, the parent, right? And then we look at the ones that are not dependent, right? Being able to delete doesn't care about which module you're in. Update doesn't care which module you're in. Okay. We also took a look at the navigation, encoding state in the URL, right? So that we can drive the content. Notice if I go back, right? These modules are for another course, right? Each module can have. Now it looks like somebody's already using this. Somebody's playing around with this, probably from the previous course, right? So yeah, so each course will have its own modules. I mean, that's the intent. And what you're going to be able to do eventually is then, as you select different modules, you're going to load different lessons, right? And if you load different lessons, if you select a particular lessons, then you're going to load different topics and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Could you show the JSON file that's in the database just to see the structure?
The JSON file.
The JSON where all the courses are being, the server.
What do you mean?
The place where all the courses and modules are being saved.
It's a database.
Yes.
So it's not a file. and it's a huge content. Let's see if I can. It's in Heroku. It's in my generic server. Let's see if I can connect to this. Resources. This is my database. And let's see if I can see any data here. They have a browser that allows you to navigate through this. Rocket, object, rocket. Yeah,
I guess I just wanted to know, like, what is the structure of the data? Like, how are all the objects being saved?
Oh no, that's easy, right? They basically, all objects get this. It's metadata. So they all get that, which that's my server generates that, right? And then any other attribute that you add there, you're free to put whatever you want, right? Everything's stored as a string, right? So you can put here title, how many seats, start date, end date. You can put whatever field you want, and I tag along my own fields. They all start with underscore, and so that I know when it was created, when it was updated. Also, NUID, right? This is whether it's my data or your data. So that's how I filter my data from your data, right? So this here, the URL, this URL Janunzi, right? That is used to fetch, my data or your data. Yes. Also, this here, modules and courses, the way I implement the parent-child relationship is that I use this attribute here, which it could be doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter to me. So that's why I can create any relationship between anything. Basically, I say that this is your parent ID. So this courses comes from the URL here, courses. So I know that this is a foreign key that knows that all these modules have the same parent. Okay, and this domain, right, is basically modules, the data that you're retrieving, modules. So, but which modules? Only the modules within a particular courses. Anyway, all that is internal to me. You don't need to know any of that. You need to know how the URLs work, right? And also you need to make sure that whatever object I return, if you want to update something, you need to send me back the exact same object. You can change whatever title you want, any of your variables, you can change whatever you want, but these you have to leave alone, right? Otherwise it doesn't work. All this breaks apart. So whenever you're putting, you need to pass me the same object, right? Obviously for post, you don't care, right? For delete, you don't care. For finding, you don't care, right? For put, yeah, I do need you to send me back the same object that I sent you with new values, right? New values for whatever you're editing, right? So I don't touch this. Whatever you send me for that, this verbatim are being stored. Your own attributes, whatever you post, whatever you put is being updated in there. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Any other question?
Professor, I got a question.
Yes, what's up?
So when we click on a course and then we open up a page, we store all the modules that we see into a local state variable, but then we go back and then we open another course. Are we supposed to clear the existing state, or do we maintain the modules of all the courses in this state so far?
Well, no, I mean, every time you select a different course, these are replacing whatever
previous state you had in the reducer, because there's only one module reducer and you have only one state, right? And it's completely replacing whatever arrays you had in there, right?
That's right. So every time we do whenever it does a component did mount, it's going to be erasing whatever we have fetched previously, and then it's going to repopulate it, right? Okay,
Yes.
got it. Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? All right, excellent. Thank you.
Just
Yes.
One more question. When would you use state versus use effect?
So yeah, use state is to maintain local state, right? So that you can remember things without using the reducer, right? So the reducer is for global state, but the use state is for local self-contained state, right? For instance, maybe you're editing a form, right? And you're doing validation, right? You're doing maybe some simple arithmetic, right? Locally in your component, and you're not sending that to the reducer, right? Until maybe when you click on save, right? So that's the use state. Whereas use effect is, I want to be notified when the component loads, right? And so it's a good time for me to initialize myself, right? I need to initialize my state. I need to go fetch data from a server. I need to do all sorts of things, cleanup, right? And bootstrapping, yes? So yeah, so one maintains the state, whereas the other one is notified that it's a good time to initialize your state. One says, well, what are you going to put in that state? Right? One says, well, here's where you can put the state. And one says, well, I need to know when, right? So one is the what, and the other is the when.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right, folks, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Make sure that when you're looking this on, if you're looking at this on, register and join and share with folks, right? It really helps. All right, thank you so much. Good night.